My husband stood over his convulsing mother, and for a split second he looked annoyed, not terrified, annoyed, like she was a stain on his new rug rather than a dying woman. He checked his watch before he checked her pulse. That was the moment I knew. The poison burning through her veins wasn't meant for the old woman who hated me. It was meant for the wife he claimed to love. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. I never imagined that the soundtrack of my pregnancy would be the echo of my own retching against porcelain. But there I was at 6 a.m, my knees pressed against the freezing bathroom tiles, my body trying to expel an empty stomach. It was violent and exhausting, a physical rejection of the world that left me trembling and gasping for air. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and leaned my forehead against the cool ceramic of the toilet tank. This was my reality now. 12 weeks pregnant and so sick I could barely remember what it felt like to be human. I closed my eyes and listened to the silence of the house. It was heavy, oppressive. Usually, at this hour, I would hear the soft sounds of Bennett getting ready for work in the adjacent room, the rustle of a dress shirt, the zip of trousers, the heavy thud of his loafers. But today, there was nothing, just the ringing in my ears and the sour taste of bile. I wondered if he was even there. For the last 2 months, ever since the second pink line appeared on the plastic stick, Bennett had been a ghost in his own home. He came home late, left early, and slept on the far edge of the mattress, his back turned to me like a fortress wall. My stomach cramped again, a sharp, twisting knot that made me whimper aloud. I wanted to call out to him. I wanted my husband to come in, rub my back, and tell me it was going to be okay. But the thought of his cold stare stopped the words in my throat. The last time I had complained about the nausea, he had just looked at me over the top of his tablet and told me to drink some water, his voice flat and disinterested. It wasn't cruelty exactly, it was indifference, which somehow hurt worse. It was as if I had become an inconvenient appliance that was malfunctioning. I pushed myself up, my limbs shaking with effort. The mirror above the sink showed me a stranger. My skin was the color of old parchment, gray and lifeless. Dark purple bruises sat under my eyes, evidence of weeks of sleepless nights. My hair was a tangled mess that I hadn't had the energy to wash in 3 days. I looked like a walking corpse. I felt a surge of guilt. I was supposed to be glowing. I was supposed to be radiantly happy about bringing a life into the world. Instead, I felt like I was slowly dying. I splashed cold water on my face, watching the droplets run down my chin. I thought about the bank account I had checked yesterday. The balance had seemed lower than usual, but my brain was too foggy to do the math. I thought about the late-night texts Bennett received, the way his phone screen would light up the dark room at 2 a.m, and how he would snatch it up before I could see the sender. Paranoid. I was being paranoid. That's what Priscilla, my mother-in-law, kept telling me. She said pregnancy made women hysterical. She said I was looking for drama. Maybe she was right. Maybe the sickness was rotting my brain as well as my body. I gripped the edge of the sink, my knuckles turning white. I just needed to get through today. Just one more day. I would go back to bed, hide under the duvet, and pray for the nausea to pass. I turned to leave the bathroom, my hand reaching for the light switch, when a shadow fell across the doorway. Bennett was standing there. I flinched, a small, involuntary jerk of my shoulders. He was dressed in his navy suit, the one he usually saved for board meetings or client dinners. His tie was perfectly knotted, a silk crimson that looked too bright for the gray morning light. But it wasn't his clothes that made me freeze. It was his face. He looked worried. Genuinely, deeply worried. His eyebrows were pulled together, his eyes soft and searching. It was an expression I hadn't seen in months, not since the day we found out I was pregnant and he had hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. That man had vanished weeks ago, replaced by the cold stranger who slept next to me. But now, here he was again. "Julianne," he said softly, his voice thick with concern. "You sound terrible. I heard you from the bedroom." I stared at him, unable to process the shift. My brain scrambled to find a response, but all I could manage was a weak nod. I expected him to check his watch. I expected him to say he was running late and that I should try to be quieter. Instead, he took a step into the bathroom and reached out, his hand hovering near my shoulder before gently settling on my arm. His touch was warm, startlingly so against my cold skin. "You can't keep going like this," he said, his thumb rubbing small, soothing circles against my sleeve. "You're wasting away. I'm worried about you, Jules." The nickname hit me like a physical blow. He hadn't called me Jules in forever. My throat tightened, and I felt the dangerous prickle of tears. I wanted to lean into him, to collapse against his chest and let him hold me up. But a small, sharp voice in the back of my head whispered a warning. Why now? Why, after weeks of silence and cold shoulders, was he suddenly playing the doting husband at 6:30 in the morning? "I'm fine," I managed to croak, my voice raspy. "Just a bad morning. It passes." "No, you're not fine," he insisted, guiding me gently out of the bathroom. "You need nutrients. You need to eat something that will stay down." I've been doing some reading. Reading? Bennett didn't read about pregnancy. He didn't even read the pamphlets the doctor gave us. He outsourced everything. He was a man who hired people to fix things, not a man who researched ginger root at dawn. "I found this recipe," he continued, steering me toward the stairs. "It's supposed to be foolproof for morning sickness. Ginger tea with raw honey and fresh mint and soft scrambled eggs. Very specific preparation. I'm going to make it for you." I stopped at the top of the landing, pulling my arm away gently. "You don't cook, Bennett. You burn toast. We have a housekeeper for a reason." He smiled, a tight, quick expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I can cook for my wife when she's sick. I went to the 24-hour market last night after work, got fresh ginger, organic eggs, the works. Please, Julianne, let me do this for you. I feel helpless watching you suffer." I looked at him, really looked at him. He seemed desperate. There was a sheen of sweat on his upper lip, and his hands were clasping and unclasping at his sides. Was it guilt? Had he finally realized how absent he had been? A wave of hope washed over me, fragile and desperate. Maybe he was trying. Maybe he had seen how sick I was and it had shocked him back into being the man I married. I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to believe that so badly. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, thank you." "Go sit at the island," he said, the tension in his shoulders visibly dropping. "I'll handle everything. Just rest." I walked down the stairs, gripping the banister, my mind spinning. He went to the market last night? Bennett hated grocery shopping. He called it a waste of billable hours. Why would he go out of his way to buy organic eggs in the middle of the night? The skepticism was there, buzzing like a fly I couldn't swat away, but I pushed it down. I was exhausted. I was sick. I didn't have the energy to question kindness, even if it felt strange. I sat on one of the high bar stools at the kitchen island, wrapping my robe tighter around myself. The granite countertop was cold under my elbows. The kitchen was pristine, thanks to the cleaning service, a stark contrast to the chaotic mess inside my body. Bennett moved around the space with a frantic sort of energy. He pulled a copper pan from the rack, one we never used, and set it on the burner. I watched him through half-closed eyes. He was moving with a precision that felt foreign. Bennett was a chaotic cook on the rare occasions he tried. He threw things in pans, made messes, laughed when things burned. Today, he was like a surgeon. He laid out the ingredients on a wooden cutting board, a knob of ginger, a small jar of honey, a carton of eggs, and a bunch of bright green mint. He took a knife and began to slice the ginger. His movements were jerky, stiff. He kept glancing at his phone, which he had propped up against the toaster. I leaned forward slightly, squinting. Was he following a recipe? Is it difficult to make? I asked, my voice breaking the silence. He jumped, the knife clattering against the board. He looked at me, his eyes wide before composing himself. No, not difficult. Just want to get the ratios right. It's important. The chemistry has to be right to settle the stomach. Chemistry. It was an odd word to use for breakfast. I watched as he cracked 3 eggs into a bowl. He whisked them vigorously, his eyes darting back to the phone screen every few seconds. It wasn't just a glance, it was a check, like he was confirming instructions. Who needs instructions to scramble eggs? I felt a twinge of unease in my gut that had nothing to do with the baby. Something was off. The air in the kitchen felt charged, heavy with static. I watched him reach into his pocket and pull out something small. His hand moved quickly, hovering over the bowl of eggs. "What's that?" I asked. His hand snapped back as if he had been burned. He turned his back to me, blocking my view of the counter with his broad shoulders. Just salt, sea salt, and a special spice blend the article recommended, turmeric, good for inflammation. I didn't see a spice jar. I saw a flash of something reflective, like glass or plastic. But he was blocking me now, whisking furiously. I heard the clink of metal against ceramic, a rhythmic, frantic sound. My heart started to beat a little faster. Why was he hiding the salt? "You know I don't like turmeric," I said, my suspicion sharpening. "It tastes like dirt." "You won't taste it," he said, his voice tight. "It's masked by the honey and the mint. Trust me, Jules. It's for the nausea." He turned back around and his hands were empty. The eggs were a bright, uniform yellow in the bowl. He poured them into the pan, and the sizzle of butter filled the room. The smell hit me instantly, rich and fatty. Usually the smell of cooking food sent me running for the bathroom, but this time, underneath the butter, there was a sharp, clean scent of ginger that actually made my mouth water. I watched him tend to the eggs. He wasn't just cooking, he was brooding over the pan. He kept pushing the eggs around, folding them over and over, his face intense and focused. He looked like he was defusing a bomb, not making breakfast. Sweat was beading on his forehead now. Why was he so nervous? It was just eggs. "Are you okay?" I asked. "You're sweating." "It's hot in here," he snapped, then immediately softened his tone. "Sorry. I just want it to be perfect. I want you to feel better." He didn't look at me when he said it. He was staring at the eggs, watching them coagulate, his jaw set hard. I had the sudden, irrational urge to tell him to stop, to throw the eggs in the trash. But that was crazy. My husband was trying to do something nice for me. I was being ungrateful. I was being the hormonal, difficult wife Priscilla always said I was. I forced myself to take a deep breath. He was trying. I had to let him try. Bennett arranged everything on a wooden serving tray with trembling hands. I saw the tremor as he set the mug of tea down. The liquid sloshed slightly, a golden brown concoction with fresh mint leaves floating on top. Next to it, he placed the plate of eggs, perfectly fluffy and steaming, and 2 slices of toast cut into triangles. He even added a folded napkin. It looked like something from a hotel room service menu. He picked up the tray and walked around the island to where I was sitting. He set it down in front of me like it was a sacred offering. "Eat," he said, "while it's hot." I looked down at the food. The steam rising from the mug carried the scent of honey and ginger, strong and sweet. My stomach gave a little rumble of interest, the first sign of appetite I'd had in 48 hours. I reached for the mug, wrapping my cold fingers around the warm ceramic. "Thank you, Bennett," I said softly. "This looks amazing." He didn't smile. He was watching my hands, his eyes locked on the mug. "Just sip it slowly," he instructed, "and eat the eggs, all of them. The protein is crucial." I lifted the mug to my lips. I could feel his gaze on me, heavy and expectant. It felt like a weight pressing down on my shoulders. I hesitated, the mug hovering inches from my mouth. Why was he staring like that? It was unnerving. "Aren't you having anything?" I asked, lowering the mug slightly. "No, I ate earlier. I'm not hungry. Just eat, Julianne. Please. The urgency in his voice was unmistakable. It wasn't the gentle coaxing of a worried husband anymore. It was a command, a desperate, sharp command. I looked at his face. He was pale, his skin almost waxy under the kitchen lights. He looked like he was about to be sick himself. "What is going on with you?" I asked, setting the mug down with a clink. "You're acting like you're terrified. Is it the baby? Is something wrong at work?" "Nothing is wrong," he practically shouted, the sudden volume making me jump. "I just want you to eat the damn breakfast. Why do you have to question everything? Why do you have to make everything so difficult?" I recoiled, shock washing over me. The veneer of kindness had cracked, revealing the anger that had been simmering underneath for months. This was the Bennett I had come to know recently, impatient, explosive, resentful. "I'm not trying to be difficult," I whispered, tears pricking my eyes again. "I'm just confused. You're acting strange." He closed his eyes and took a deep, shuddering breath. I watched his chest rise and fall. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm just stressed. I hate seeing you sick. I just want to fix it. Please, just try the tea." I looked at the tea. The mint leaves swirled in the amber liquid. I felt a confusing mix of fear and obligation. He had gone to so much trouble. If I didn't eat it, he would explode again. He would retreat back into his silence, and I would be alone again. I didn't want to be alone. I picked up the mug again. I would take a sip. Just a sip to appease him. The click of heels on the hardwood floor was the only warning we got. It was a sharp staccato rhythm. Click, 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 fast and aggressive. I froze, the mug halfway to my mouth. Bennett's head snapped toward the hallway, his eyes widening in panic. Priscilla swept into the kitchen like a storm front. She was wearing a charcoal gray pantsuit that looked like it had been ironed with military precision. Her silver hair was coiffed into an immovable helmet, and her lips were painted a severe shade of burgundy. My mother-in-law didn't walk. She marched. "Well, isn't this a domestic masterpiece?" she announced, her voice dripping with that sugary venom she had perfected. She stopped in the center of the kitchen, her eyes scanning the scene. They landed on me, sitting in my bathrobe, and then on the tray of food. Her lip curled slightly. "I see the invalid is finally awake," she said, "and being waited on hand and foot, as usual. I didn't realize we were running a bed and breakfast, Bennett." Bennett shrank. It was the only way to describe it. His shoulders hunched, and he took a half step back, putting distance between himself and me. "Mom, I was just—" "She's sick. Sick," she scoffed. She waved a manicured hand in the air dismissively. "She's pregnant, Bennett, not dying. I raised 3 children while working a full-time job and managing a household. I didn't spend my mornings lounging in a robe demanding gourmet service. I felt the familiar heat rise in my cheeks. It wasn't embarrassment anymore. It was rage. For 10 months since we moved into this house, which was technically ours, but she acted like she owned the deed, Priscilla had made it her mission to dismantle me. I was too soft, too lazy, too American. I didn't demand anything, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Bennett offered. "Oh, he offered," she mimicked, her eyes narrowing. "Because he's a good man, a man who works 60 hours a week to pay for this house, for your clothes, for the nursery you're filling with overpriced, useless junk. And how do you repay him? By turning him into a servant before he even leaves for the office." She walked closer to the island, her perfume, something heavy and floral like a funeral home, filling the space. She looked at the tray with disdain. "Scrambled eggs and special tea," she muttered. "It must be nice to have such leisure time. My stomach has been in knots all morning. I haven't eaten a thing because I've been too busy dealing with the landscapers you forgot to call, Julianne. But please, enjoy your feast." She looked at Bennett, waiting for him to defend me, waiting for him to say, "Mom, stop it. She's carrying my child." I looked at him too. I pleaded with him silently. "Say something." Bennett said nothing. He stared at the floor, his face pale and bead still with sweat. He was paralyzed. The man who had just screamed at me to eat was now mute in the face of his mother. The injustice of it clawed at my throat. He had made this elaborate breakfast, acted so concerned, and the moment his mother walked in, he threw me to the wolves. He let her call me lazy. He let her humiliate me. I looked at the tray. The steam was still rising from the eggs. The smell of the ginger tea, which had been so inviting a moment ago, now made my stomach turn. I couldn't eat this. I couldn't swallow a single bite while she stood there judging me and he stood there ignoring me. Something inside me fractured. It was a clean, sharp break. I was done. I was done being the victim. I was done being the sick, helpless wife. I was done with Bennett's cowardice and Priscilla's cruelty. I stood up. The movement was sudden enough that Priscilla took a step back, startled. I picked up the heavy wooden tray. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady with adrenaline. "You know what, Priscilla?" I said, my voice surprisingly loud in the quiet kitchen. "You're absolutely right." Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" I walked around the island, closing the distance between us. "I'm lazy. I'm ungrateful. And you work so hard. You're clearly the martyr of this family. You said you haven't eaten? You said your stomach is in knots?" I shoved the tray toward her. She instinctively reached out and grabbed the edges to stop it from hitting her chest. "Here," I said. "Take it." "Julianne," Bennett croaked. His voice was a strangled whisper. "Don't." I ignored him. I kept my eyes locked on Priscilla's shocked face. Bennett made it specially. Organic eggs. Ginger tea with honey and fresh mint. It's supposed to be excellent for stomach knots. Since you do so much for us, you deserve it more than I do. Priscilla looked down at the tray in her hands, then back up at me. She looked confused, waiting for the punchline. She expected me to cry. She expected me to run out of the room. She didn't expect me to serve her breakfast. A slow, triumphant smile spread across her face. She thought she had won. She thought I was surrendering. "Well," she said, sniffing haughtily, "at least you're finally showing some respect. It's about time you realized your place." She turned and marched over to the kitchen table, setting the tray down with a decisive clank. She sat down, smoothing her napkin over her lap. "Bennett, sit with me," she commanded. "Your wife is going back to bed, I assume." I looked at Bennett. He looked like he was watching a car crash in slow motion. His eyes were fixed on the tray, wide and terrified. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "Bennett?" Priscilla asked, picking up the fork. I turned on my heel and walked toward the stairs. I didn't look back. I heard the clink of silverware against the plate. I heard Priscilla hum with satisfaction. "Delicious," she said loudly, ensuring her voice carried to me. "See, Bennett? Real food. Much better than that takeout trash she usually orders." I gripped the banister and climbed. Every step felt heavy. I felt a strange mix of victory and defeat. I had stood up for myself, yes, but I was still hungry. I was still sick. And my husband was still a coward who sat at the table with his mother rather than checking on his crying wife. I reached the top of the stairs and walked down the hallway to our bedroom. I didn't know then that I had just signed a death warrant. I didn't know that by handing over that tray, I had shifted the target on a loaded gun. All I knew was that I wanted to sleep until the world went away. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands gripping the duvet, waiting for the sound of Bennett's footsteps. I expected him to come upstairs and reprimand me. I expected him to tell me I was being childish, that I had embarrassed him in front of his mother, that I needed to go back downstairs and apologize. That was the script we had been following for months. But the footsteps that came were not the heavy, angry stomps of a husband coming to lecture his wife. They were fast, frantic scuffles like a rat trapped in a maze. Bennett burst into the bedroom. He didn't look at me. He went straight to the nightstand and grabbed his watch, fumbling with the clasp. He dropped it, cursed under his breath, and snatched it up again. Then he moved to the dresser, grabbing his wallet and his car keys. His movements were jerky, uncoordinated. He looked like a man who was late for a flight he had already missed. "Bennett," I said, my voice quiet in the tense room. "Are you going to say anything?" He froze for a second, his back to me. I saw his shoulders rise and fall with a sharp intake of breath. He turned around, but he didn't look me in the eye. His gaze darted around the room, landing on the window, the floor, the closet door, anywhere but my face. "I have to go," he said, his voice high and tight. "I'm late." "The meeting." "I told you about the meeting." "You never leave without saying goodbye," I said. "And you never leave your mother alone when she's in a mood like this. You usually stay to referee." "I can't stay," he snapped, the volume startling us both. "I have to go right now. Mom is fine. She has breakfast. She's happy. I have to go." He practically ran for the door. I stood up, confused by the sheer terror radiating off him. He wasn't just stressed, he was afraid. Why would he be afraid of a breakfast meeting? "Bennett," I called out as he reached the hallway. He stopped, his hand on the doorframe. He looked back at me then, and for a fleeting second the mask slipped completely. I didn't see irritation or anger. I saw horror. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost, or perhaps a corpse. His face was the color of ash. "I'm sorry, Jules," he whispered. Then he was gone. I heard his footsteps thundering down the stairs, past the kitchen where his mother was eating, and out the front door. The heavy oak door slammed shut with a force that shook the floorboards beneath my feet. A moment later, I heard the engine of his sedan roar to life, followed by the screech of tires peeling out of the driveway. He was driving like he was fleeing a crime scene. I stood in the silence of the bedroom, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. He had left me. He had left me alone with her. But more than that, he had looked at me with a finality that chilled my blood. That wasn't a goodbye for the day. That felt like a goodbye for forever. I tried to lie down. I tried to close my eyes and let the exhaustion pull me under, but my brain wouldn't shut off. It kept replaying the morning on a loop. The way Bennett had sliced the ginger with surgical precision. The way he had hidden the small object in his pocket when I asked about the spices. The way he had sweated over the pan. Why had he been so insistent that I eat it? "The protein is crucial," he had said. He had watched that mug of tea like it was a holy grail. And then, the moment I gave it away, he had crumbled. I rolled over, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above me. Maybe I was crazy. Maybe the pregnancy hormones were rewiring my brain, turning innocuous acts of kindness into sinister plots. Priscilla was right. I was dramatic. I was looking for problems. Bennett was probably just stressed about work and money, and here I was, psychoanalyzing his omelet preparation. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I strained my ears, listening for the sounds of Priscilla downstairs. Usually she would be making noise by now, clattering dishes in the sink, aggressively to let me know I should be cleaning, or turning up the television volume to an obnoxious level. But there was nothing. Just the low hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of a lawnmower from a neighbor's yard. My stomach gave a lurch, but not from sickness this time. It was a gut instinct, a primal warning bell ringing in the base of my skull. Something was wrong. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It felt like the air before a thunderstorm, charged and thick. I sat up, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. I needed water. My mouth tasted like copper and fear. I told myself I was just going downstairs to get a glass of water, maybe apologize to Priscilla to keep the peace. I told myself everything was fine, but my hands were trembling as I reached for the doorknob. I was halfway down the stairs when I heard it. It wasn't a shout. It was a sound of pure animal distress, a low guttural moan that escalated into a wet, violent retching sound, then a crash. It sounded like a chair being knocked over, followed by the heavy thud of a body hitting the floor. "Priscilla," I called out, my voice trembling. Silence followed, then another sound, the sound of heels scrabbling against the hardwood, erratic and desperate. I ran down the rest of the stairs, forgetting my own nausea, forgetting the dizziness. I rounded the corner into the kitchen and skidded to a halt. The scene before me made my brain short-circuit. Priscilla was on the floor. The wooden tray was overturned, the remains of the scrambled eggs scattered across the white tiles like yellow confetti. The mug lay shattered in a pool of amber liquid. But it was Priscilla who terrified me. She was on her hands and knees, clawing at her throat. Her face, usually so composed and perfectly made up, was a mask of agony. Her skin had turned a terrifying shade of gray-blue. Veins bulged in her neck and forehead. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a strangled, gurgling sound came out. Vomit, dark and viscous, pooled beneath her. "Priscilla," I screamed, dropping to my knees beside her. She looked at me, her eyes wide and bloodshot, capillaries burst in the whites. There was no recognition in them, only blind panic. She grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my flesh so hard it broke the skin. She was convulsing now, her entire body seizing in rhythmic, violent jerks. "Help!" she gasped, the word barely intelligible through the fluids in her throat. Fire. Burning. I touched her forehead. It was burning hot, but her skin felt clammy and wet. This wasn't food poisoning. I had had food poisoning. It was miserable, but it didn't look like this. This looked like she was being dissolved from the inside out. I grabbed a dish towel from the oven handle and tried to wipe her mouth, but she shoved me away, thrashing. Her heels kicked against the cabinets with a hollow, booming sound. "I need to call an ambulance," I stammered, scrambling backward to find my phone. I patted the pockets of my robe. Empty. I had left it upstairs. I looked at the landline on the wall, the old-fashioned corded phone Priscilla insisted we keep. I lunged for it, tearing the receiver from the cradle. I dialed the 3 digits, my fingers slipping on the plastic buttons. "Operator, what is your emergency?" The voice was calm, robotic. "My mother-in-law, she's collapsing, she's seizing, she can't breathe. We're at 42 Oak Creek Lane. Please hurry. She's turning blue." Dispatcher: "We have a unit dispatched. Is she conscious?" "Barely. She's vomiting. She says it burns." I dropped the landline, leaving it dangling by the cord, and ran back to Priscilla. She had stopped thrashing and was now curled in a fetal position, shivering so violently her teeth chattered. I needed to tell Bennett. He needed to know. I sprinted back up the stairs, my lungs burning. I grabbed my cell phone from the nightstand and dialed Bennett's number. It rang once, twice. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Did you eat it?" That was his opening line. "No. Hello. No. Why are you calling?" Just 3 words spoken in a voice so tight it sounded like a wire about to snap. "Bennett!" I screamed into the phone. "Your mother is dying. She's on the kitchen floor. She's having a seizure. You have to come back." There was a pause, a long, dead silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the hum of the road in the background, the whoosh of wind against his car window. "Bennett? Did you hear me?" "What do you mean she's dying?" he asked, his voice suddenly very quiet. "I don't know. She ate the breakfast, and 10 minutes later she collapsed. She's turning blue, Bennett." "The ambulance is coming. Turn around." "Wait," he said. The word was sharp. "She ate the breakfast? All of it?" "Yes, I gave it to her because she was yelling at me." "Bennett, why does that matter? She's sick." Another silence. This one felt different. It wasn't shock. It was calculation. "You didn't eat any? Not a bite?" "No. Why are you asking me about me?" "Oh, God," he whispered. It sounded like a prayer, but not a benevolent one. "Oh, God. Bennett, come home." "I can't," he said. And then the line went dead. I stared at the phone screen. The call ended duration reading 42 seconds. He had hung up. He wasn't coming. He heard his mother was dying after eating the food he prepared, and his only reaction was to ask if I had eaten it, and then hang up. A cold dread, colder than the tile floor, settled into the pit of my stomach. The puzzle pieces slammed together in my mind with a deafening click. The reading, the precision, the shaking hands, the the terror when I gave the tray away. He hadn't made that breakfast to make me feel better. He had made it to make me stop feeling anything at all. The paramedics were a blur of navy blue uniforms and urgent voices. They swarmed the kitchen, pushing me aside with professional efficiency. I stood against the refrigerator, hugging myself, watching as they inserted a tube down Priscilla's throat. She was limp now, her body like a rag doll, the fight drained out of her. "BP is dropping," one of them shouted. 70/40. Pulse is thready. We have tachycardia. Possible anaphylaxis? No, another one said, sniffing the air near the vomit. Look at the pupils. Pinpoint. And the muscle rigidity. This is toxicity. Neurotoxin, maybe. Or a massive overdose. They loaded her onto the stretcher, lifting her dead weight with a synchronized grunt. One of the paramedics, a woman with a kind face and a ponytail, turned to me. "Are you family?" I nodded, unable to speak. "You need to come with us. We might need history. Does she have allergies? Medications?" I grabbed my purse from the counter, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I followed them out to the ambulance, the red flashing lights cutting through the gray morning like strobe lights in a nightmare. The ride was a chaotic assault on the senses. The siren wailed, a deafening rise and fall that vibrated in my teeth. The ambulance swayed and bumped as we sped through traffic. I sat on the narrow bench seat staring at Priscilla. She looked small. Stripped of her posture and her sharp tongue, she was just an elderly woman dying on a stretcher. Her hand flopped over the side of the rail, limp and pale. Without thinking, I reached out and took it. Her skin was cold. Suddenly, her fingers clamped around mine. It was a weak, spasmodic grip, but it was there. Her eyes fluttered open, rolling back in her head, unfocused and blind. "Snake," she whispered. "A snake in the house." I leaned in close, my ear near her lips. "What did you say, Priscilla?" "He fed it to me," she rasped, a bubble of saliva forming at the corner of her mouth. "He fed the snake." She wasn't making sense. She was delirious. But the grip on my hand tightened, painful and desperate. She knew, somewhere in the fog of her dying brain, she knew that the danger hadn't come from the outside. It had come from her own kitchen. I squeezed her hand back. "I'm here," I whispered. "I'm here." It was the first time in 10 months we had touched without malice, and it took a lethal dose of poison to make it happen. The emergency room waiting area smelled of stale coffee and industrial disinfectant. They had wheeled Priscilla through the double doors 20 minutes ago, leaving me stranded in the plastic chairs with the other morning casualties. A crying baby, a man holding a bloody towel to his hand, an old man coughing into a handkerchief. I sat staring at the television mounted on the wall, the news scrolling silently across the bottom. I felt hollowed out. My morning sickness had returned with a vengeance, fueled by the adrenaline crash. I needed water. My mouth was so dry my tongue felt like sandpaper. I stood up, my legs wobbly, and walked over to the vending machine in the corner. I fished my wallet out of my purse. I pulled out my debit card, the joint account Bennett and I used for everything. I inserted it into the slot and pressed the button for a bottle of water. Processing. The small green screen read. Then a sharp beep. Authorization declined. I frowned. That couldn't be right. We had thousands in checking. Bennett had just received his bonus. I wiped the chip on my sweater and tried again. Processing. Authorization declined. Panic, a new and different kind, began to prickle at my skin. I pulled out our joint credit card, the platinum one with the high limit. I swiped it this time. Transaction denied. Contact issuer. I tried my personal credit card, the one I had kept from before we were married, though Bennett insisted we pool our finances, and I rarely used it. Denied. I stared at the glowing red letters. It wasn't a glitch. 3 different cards, 3 different banks, all denied. I pulled up my banking app on my phone, my fingers flying across the screen. I logged in. The loading circle spun for an agonizing 5 seconds. Then the dashboard appeared. Checking, $0.00. Savings, $0.00. I tapped on the transaction history. Today, 7 a.m., 1 hour after he left the house. A wire transfer, the entire balance, every single penny. I scrolled down. The savings account, same timestamp, transferred. He hadn't just left me. He hadn't just tried to kill me. He had erased me. He had taken the money for the mortgage, the money for the nursery, the money for the hospital bills I was about to incur. He had cleaned us out with the efficiency of a demolition crew. I looked around the waiting room. I had no car, no cash, no access to funds. My husband was gone. His mother was dying in the next room, and I didn't even have $2 to buy a bottle of water. I sank down onto the floor right there in front of the vending machine, the cold linoleum seeping through my robe. I wrapped my arms around my knees. I wasn't crying. I was past crying. I was realizing with a terrifying clarity that I was completely trapped. "Excuse me, miss." A nurse was standing over me. "You can't sit there." I looked up at her. "I don't have any money," I said, my voice flat. "My husband took all the money." She looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Honey, do you need me to call a social worker?" I laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound. A social worker couldn't help me. I didn't need a social worker. I needed a lawyer. I needed a miracle. And I needed to know why the man who promised to love me forever had decided today was the day I needed to die. The phone vibrating against my thigh felt like a physical assault. I stared at the screen, my vision swimming with exhaustion and dehydration. It wasn't Bennett. It was a local number, one I had programmed in with the label, "Do Not Answer." It was Mrs. Higgins. She was our neighbor 2 doors down, a woman in her 70s who spent her retirement measuring the height of our grass with a ruler and leaving passive-aggressive notes about our trash cans. I almost let it go to voicemail. I didn't have the bandwidth for a noise complaint while my life was imploding. But the vibration was persistent, an angry buzz against the hospital floor. I slid my thumb across the screen. "Mrs. Higgins, I can't talk right now," I said, my voice cracking. "I know you can't talk," she snapped. "You're at the hospital. I saw the ambulance." The lights were flashing right into my front window. Disgraceful. Woke up Mr. Buttons. I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the vending machine. "I'm sorry about your cat, Mrs. Higgins. Priscilla is... She's very sick." "I know she's sick," she interrupted. "I saw them carry her out. But that's not why I'm calling, Julianne. I'm calling because the police are crawling all over your lawn now, and I want to know if I should tell them about the blonde man." My eyes snapped open. "The blonde man?" "Yes. The one who was parked in front of your driveway at 4 a.m. The air in the waiting room seemed to vanish. I gripped the phone tighter. "Mrs. Higgins, what are you talking about?" "I have insomnia, Julianne. You know this. I was up watching the street. A sedan pulled up. Not Bennett's car, a black one. A man got out. Tall, blonde hair, fancy suit. Looked like he was going to a nightclub, not a suburban driveway." I held my breath. "And your husband came out of the house." "He was in his pajamas. He looked terrified, if you ask me." He handed the blonde man a package, a small brown envelope. Then the blonde man gave him something back. A little white box. Looked like a pharmacy bag. A pharmacy bag. Bennett had told me he went to the 24-hour market for ginger. He never mentioned a pharmacy. He never mentioned meeting anyone. "Did they say anything?" I whispered. "I couldn't hear words," Mrs. Higgins huffed, but the blonde man patted Bennett on the face. Disrespectful, I thought, like he was a dog. Then Bennett went back inside, and the man drove off. 2 hours later, the ambulance comes. "Now, do I tell the police, or is this some sort of drug deal you two are running? Because I will report you to the Homeowners Association." "Mrs. Higgins," I said, and for the first time in my life, I wanted to kiss the woman. "Tell the police. Tell them everything. Tell them exactly what time. Tell them about the white box. Please." I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore, from rage. A white box, at 4 a.m. He hadn't gone shopping for ingredients to help me. He had gone to pick up the weapon. The nurse who had offered me the social worker returned. She didn't look annoyed anymore. She looked grave. She led me away from the vending machines and into a small, windowless consultation room. Dr. Monroe was waiting for me. She was a petite woman with sharp features and eyes that didn't blink enough. She gestured for me to sit, but I remained standing, gripping the back of the plastic chair. "Mrs. Chambers," she began, her voice clinically detached, "we have stabilized your mother-in-law, but she is in a medically induced coma. Her organs are under significant stress." "What is it?" I asked. "Was it a stroke?" Dr. Monroe shook her head. "No. We ran a toxicology screen immediately given the violent onset of symptoms. We found high concentrations of a substance called ethylene glycol, mixed with a potent sedative." I stared at her. Ethylene glycol. The words sounded familiar, like something I had read on a warning label in the garage. "Antifreeze," Dr. Monroe clarified, seeing my confusion, "but purified, tasteless, odorless, and the sedative masked the initial burn, which is why she was able to consume enough of it to cause this level of damage." My knees finally gave out, and I sank into the chair. Antifreeze. He had put antifreeze in the eggs. He had put it in the tea. He had whisked it in with the honey and the mint, masking the chemical taste with sweetness. "He told me it was a special spice blend," I whispered. "He said it was turmeric." Dr. Monroe pulled a notepad from her pocket. "The police are on their way, Mrs. Chambers. This wasn't an accident. This was a lethal dose. If she hadn't vomited so violently and immediately, she would be dead already." I looked at my hands. They looked like the hands of a stranger. 10 minutes. That was all that separated me from Priscilla. If I had been a good wife and eaten the breakfast, I would be the one in that coma. Or worse. "There's something else," Dr. Monroe said, her voice softening slightly. "We need to check you." "Me? I haven't eaten anything. Mrs. Chambers, ethylene glycol poisoning mimics, alcohol intoxication, and severe morning sickness, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, confusion. How long have you been feeling this sick?" The room tilted. The walls seemed to close in. 6 weeks. I had been sick for 6 weeks. Detective Tate looked like a man who had seen too much and slept too little. He wore a rumpled suit and smelled faintly of tobacco. He sat across from me in the consultation room, a small notebook open on his knee. "So, let's do the math," he said. His voice was gravelly but kind. "You started getting sick 6 weeks ago. Around the same time, your husband took out this life insurance policy." "He didn't take it out," I corrected, my voice hollow. "He upgraded it. He said with the baby coming, we needed to be secure. He doubled the payout. $2 million. Detective Tate wrote something down. $2 million. And the morning sickness? It was relentless. I couldn't keep water down. I lost 15 pounds. Everyone told me it was normal. Priscilla told me I was weak. Bennett just told me to drink my tea." I stopped. The tea. "He brings me tea every night," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "Ginger tea, before bed. He says it helps me sleep." "And did it?" Tate asked. "No. I would wake up 2 hours later retching." Tate nodded slowly. He wasn't surprised. He'd already done the math, microdosing. He had been poisoning me slowly, building up the toxicity in my system, letting everyone believe it was a difficult pregnancy. If I died, it would look like complications, a tragedy. The grieving husband would collect the insurance and the sympathy. But today, Tate said, tapping his pen against the paper, today he got impatient, or maybe he got scared. He upped the dose. He wanted it done. "Why?" I asked. "Why today?" "We're looking into his financials," Tate said. "But usually when a man rushes a murder, it's because a debt is due, or a secret is about to come out." I thought about the blonde man, the package, the urgency. "He drained the accounts," I said. "This morning, 7 o'clock. Everything is gone." Tate closed his notebook. Okay, that changes things. He's not just a husband who snapped. He's a man on a timeline. And right now, he thinks his plan worked. He thinks his mother is dead, or he thinks you are dead. We haven't released any information to the press yet. He knows Priscilla ate it, I said. I told him on the phone. He hung up. Tate leaned forward. Then he thinks his mother is the victim. He's probably panicking. He's trying to figure out how to spin this. He needs to know if the police are involved. He needs to know if you suspect him. He needs to come here, I said, understanding dawning on me. He has to play the part. If he runs now, he looks guilty. If he comes here, plays the devastated son, he might think he can talk his way out of it. Exactly, Tate said. We need him in this room, and we need him to talk. I stared at my phone. Detective Tate had plugged it into a portable battery pack, giving it just enough life to be a weapon. Text him, Tate instructed. Keep it vague. Don't accuse him. Sound confused. Sound like the wife who needs her husband. I typed the words, my fingers feeling heavy and numb. Bennett, please come. The doctors are asking questions I can't answer. I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I hit send. We waited. The 3 dots appeared almost instantly. He had been staring at his phone, waiting for news. I'm on my way, the reply came. Traffic is bad. Be there in 20. Tate signaled to the 2 uniformed officers standing outside the door. They moved out of sight down the hall. We're going to wire the room, Tate said. Audio and video. I'll be next door listening. You have to get him to say it, Julianne. Or at least, get him to reveal something only the killer would know. I can't, I whispered. I can't look at him. You have to, Tate said firmly. You're the only one who can. He thinks you're stupid, Julianne. He thinks you're the weak, sick wife who handed over her breakfast because she was too tired to argue. Use that. Be weak. Let him feel safe. I nodded. I pulled my robe tighter around me. I felt sick, physically sick, at the thought of Bennett walking through that door, the man I had shared a bed with, the man whose child was growing inside me. I placed a hand on my stomach, the baby, my daughter. He had tried to kill her too. The thought hardened something inside me. It turned the fear into cold, sharp steel. I'll do it, I said. The room they moved me to was a standard hospital room, sterile and white. They put me in the bed, propped up with pillows to look frail. I didn't have to act much. I felt like I had been run over by a truck. 20 minutes later, the door opened. Bennett walked in. He was carrying a bouquet of red roses. The sight of them made my stomach turn. They were aggressive, vibrant, totally inappropriate for a deathbed vigil. He looked like he had been through a war. His tie was loosened, his hair was disheveled, and his eyes were wide and manic. Jules, he breathed, rushing to the side of the bed. He dropped the flowers on the side table and reached for me. I had to force myself not to recoil. I had to let him take my hands. His palms were sweating. Thank God you're okay, he said, his voice thick with emotion. When you called, I thought, I didn't know what was happening. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the calculation behind the panic. He was scanning my face, looking for suspicion. Priscilla is in a coma, I said, keeping my voice trembling. They don't know if she's going to wake up. Bennett squeezed my hands tighter. It's my fault. I should have been there. I shouldn't have left. Why did you leave? I asked. The question was soft, innocent. The meeting, he said quickly. Too quickly. I told you. It was critical. But it doesn't matter now. I'm here. He leaned in to kiss my forehead. I held my breath, smelling the expensive cologne he wore, the scent that used to make me feel safe. Now it smelled like formaldehyde. I felt his lips against my skin, cold and dry. It took every ounce of willpower not to scream. Did you tell the doctors what she ate? He asked, pulling back just enough to look me in the eyes. I told them about the eggs, I said. And? Did they say anything? About food poisoning? Salmonella? He was fishing. He was desperate to know if the autopsy of the breakfast had happened yet. "They're running tests," I lied. "They said it's very strange. Her throat is burned, Bennett, like she drank acid." I watched his throat bob as he swallowed. A flicker of something dark passed over his face. "Acid? That's impossible. Unless she got into the cleaning supplies? You know how she is with bleach. Maybe she mistook a bottle for water." He was already planting the seed. The senile old woman drinking bleach. It was clumsy, desperate. "Maybe," I said. I felt so tired. "Bennett, I'm scared. They're asking about you." "About me?" His head snapped up. "Why?" "Because you made the breakfast." Bennett stood up, pacing the small room. He ran a hand through his hair. "That's ridiculous. I was trying to do something nice. I made you breakfast. You gave it away. If anyone is to blame, Julianne, it's not me." He stopped at the foot of the bed. He looked at me, and his eyes were cold again. The loving husband act was fraying at the edges. "Did you tell them about the turmeric?" he asked. "The turmeric? The spice I used. Did you tell them I put spices in it? Because some people have allergic reactions to spices. Anaphylaxis. It looks like burning." He was trying to cover his tracks. He was trying to provide an innocent explanation for the poison before they even identified it. "I didn't tell them," I said. "I forgot." "Good," he breathed. "Good. Don't mention it. It will just confuse them. They'll waste time testing for allergies when they should be looking for other things." "Like what?" I asked. "Like a stroke or a heart attack." "She's old, Jules. These things happen." He walked back to the side of the bed and picked up the pitcher of water. He poured a glass, his hand shaking. "Here, drink this. You look parched." I looked at the water. I looked at his hand, offering it to me. "I'm not thirsty," I said. "Drink it," he said. His voice dropped an octave. "It wasn't a request. I can't." "Bennett, did the police call you?" I asked suddenly. He froze, the glass halfway to my mouth. "No." "Why would the police call me?" "Because of the autopsy," I said. He dropped the glass. It hit the floor and shattered, water splashing over his expensive leather shoes. "Autopsy," he whispered. She's dead? I hadn't said she was dead. I had said she was in a coma." "You asked about the autopsy," I said, my voice gaining strength. "You asked when the coroner would be here. I assumed if she's that sick." "You assumed she was dead?" I asked. "You seemed pretty sure she wouldn't make it." Bennett took a step back. His face was twisting, the handsome features contorting into something ugly and unrecognizable. "Stop it, Julianne. You're confused. You're hysterical. I'm just trying to help you." "Help me like you helped Priscilla?" I asked. "With the antifreeze?" The word hung in the air like smoke. I saw the moment he realized it was over. His eyes darted to the door, then to the window. He looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You bitch," he hissed. "You ungrateful, useless bitch." The door burst open. Detective Tate didn't kick the door down. He didn't have to. He just walked in, his badge held high, followed by the two uniformed officers who filled the small hospital room with an imposing wall of blue. Bennett spun around, his face shifting instantly from the snarl of a cornered wolf back to the mask of the concerned husband. It was terrifying how fast he could recalibrate. "Officers, thank God," Bennett said, his voice dripping with relief. "My wife is having a breakdown. She's hysterical. She's accusing me of insane things. I think the medication is interacting with her hormones. We need a sedative." He took a step toward me, reaching out a hand as if to comfort a frightened animal. "She's not safe," he told them, pointing at me. "She's a danger to herself. Look at her. She's hallucinating." Detective Tate didn't blink. "Bennett Chambers, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of Priscilla Chambers and Julianne Chambers. Put your hands behind your back." Bennett laughed. It was a short, incredulous sound. "This is a mistake. A huge mistake. I'm a partner at Davis and Lowry. You can't just arrest me because a pregnant woman had a nightmare. Julianne, tell them. Tell them you're confused." He looked at me and his eyes bored into mine. It wasn't a plea, it was a threat wrapped in concern. "Honey," he said, softening his voice to that sick, sweet tone he used when he gaslighted me. "Just tell them you're tired. Tell them you didn't mean it. We can fix this. I can get you the best doctors. We can go away, just the two of us." I stayed silent, gripping the bedsheets. The officers moved in. One grabbed Bennett's wrist. Bennett yanked it back violently. "Get your hands off me," he shouted, the mask shattering completely. "I didn't do anything. She's lying. The old hag ate the food herself." In the scuffle, as they shoved him against the wall to cuff him, I saw it happen. Bennett's hand flailed toward his pocket. He wasn't reaching for a weapon. He was trying to get rid of something. He pulled out a small black phone, not his main smartphone, but a sleek burner flip phone. He fumbled it. The officers slammed him against the drywall and the phone skittered across the floor. It slid under the rolling tray table and dropped directly into the open red biohazard bin sitting by the door. Bennett's eyes snapped to the bin, then to me. He knew I saw it. The officers were too busy reading him his rights to notice the small splash of plastic falling into plastic. "You're making a mistake," Bennett screamed as they dragged him out the door. "Julianne, don't let them do this. You need me. You have nothing without me." And then the room was quiet. Detective Tate lingered for a second, tipping his head at me. "We've got him, Mrs. Chambers. You did good." He turned and followed his suspect, leaving me alone in the room, alone with the silence, the smell of fear, and the red bin filled with infectious waste that held the only proof I had left. A moment of relief washed over me, but it was instantly replaced by panic. The police had Bennett, but they didn't have the burner phone. They didn't have the connection to the blonde man. Without that phone, Bennett could claim the antifreeze was an accident, a household mix-up. He could claim I was crazy. He could walk. I looked at the red bin. It was a tall, rigid plastic container marked with the universal symbol for danger. Just then, a porter in gray scrubs walked into the room. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his clipboard. He walked straight to the bin, sealed the lid with a decisive snap, and began to wheel it toward the door. "Wait," I rasped. The porter stopped and looked at me, confused. "I need that." He frowned. "Need what, ma'am?" "This is Sharps and Biohazard. It goes to the incinerator in the basement, scheduled for a burn in 20 minutes. I threw the covers off my legs. I didn't care that my hospital gown was flimsy or that my head was spinning. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood up. The room tilted violently, but I grabbed the IV pole to steady myself. "You can't take it," I said, stumbling toward him. My wedding ring." I dropped it in there. By accident. The porter looked skeptical. He looked at the sealed lid. "Ma'am, once it's sealed, I can't open it. It's against protocol. Infection control. Please," I begged, tears leaking from my eyes. "It's all I have. My husband just died. Please." The lie tasted like ash, but it worked. His face softened. He looked at the door to make sure no nurses were watching, then sighed. "Make it quick," he said, "and don't touch anything sharp." He popped the seal. The smell hit me instantly, copper blood and chemical antiseptic. I looked inside. It was a nightmare of used gauze, plastic tubing, and things I didn't want to identify. I reached in. I had to shove my hand past a bloody bandage. I felt something hard and smooth at the bottom, buried under a pile of used latex gloves. My fingers grazed it. I grabbed it, pulling my hand out as fast as I could. I held the black flip phone in my trembling hand. It was smeared with something sticky. I wiped it on the bedsheet, breathing hard. "Got it," I whispered. The porter recoiled slightly, looking at the phone. "That's a weird-looking ring." I didn't answer him. I fell back onto the bed, clutching the plastic brick to my chest. I had the gun. Now I just had to find the bullets. The porter left with the bin, looking disturbed, but I didn't care. I flipped the phone open. The screen flared to life, bright and mocking. Enter passcode, 4 dashes. I stared at them. Of course it was locked. Bennett was a lawyer. He locked everything. I tried the obvious first. 1, 2, 3, 4. Incorrect passcode. I tried his birthday. April 24th. 0, 4, 2, 4. Incorrect passcode. Wait 30 seconds. I closed my eyes, forcing my brain to work through the fog of exhaustion. What number would he use for a secret life? It wouldn't be us. It wouldn't be our anniversary. He hated our anniversary. It had to be something that mattered to him. I thought about the man Mrs. Higgins described, the blonde man, the partner. I tried the date of his big promotion, the day he came home with champagne and told me we were finally going to be real players. October 1st, 1001. Incorrect passcode. Wait 60 seconds. I slammed the phone against the mattress in frustration. I had 1, maybe 2 tries left before it locked me out permanently or wiped itself. Bennett was arrogant. He was sentimental about his own success. What was the most important day in Bennett's life? Not the day he met me, not the day he got the job. It was the day he bought the boat. He didn't have a boat, but he talked about it constantly. The freedom. He had a picture of it on his vision board in the office. He had even set the date he planned to buy it. He called it his exit date. He had made a joke about it once. July 4th, Jules, Independence Day. That's when I'm finally free. I waited for the timer to tick down. My thumb hovered over the keypad. 0704. The screen blinked. Unlocked. I didn't go to the photos. I went straight to the messages. There was only one conversation thread. The contact name was just K. I opened it and the world fell away. It wasn't just a few texts. It was a novel. A detailed chronological log of my planned demise. I scrolled up, my eyes scanning the blue bubbles, each one a punch to the gut. She's still vomiting, Bennett had written 2 weeks ago. It's taking too long. Can we up the dosage? The reply from Kay was clinical. Patience. If you rush it, the ME will see the spike. It has to look like organ failure. Keep the T consistent. I read a message from the day of the ultrasound. Saw the kid today. Heartbeat is strong. It's annoying. Makes her more determined to eat. I had to guilt her into skipping dinner. I put a hand over my mouth to stifle a sob. He had starved me. He had manipulated me into skipping meals so the poison would hit an empty stomach, all while looking at the image of his own child. I scrolled further. The insurance paperwork is finalized, Bennett wrote. $2 million plus the house. We can be in Rio by September. I found a place near the water. Rio, Kay replied. Just you and me. No baggage. No baggage, Bennett agreed. Just a grieving widower looking for a fresh start. I stopped at a message sent at 4 a.m. today. I'm out of the powder. Need a refill. She's getting suspicious. I want to finish it today. 1 big dose in the eggs. Make it look like a seizure. On my way, Kay replied. Meet me in the driveway. Don't let the neighbors see you. I dropped the phone on the bed. I felt dirty. I felt violated in a way that had nothing to do with my body. He hadn't just wanted to kill me. He had erased me before I was even dead. He had turned me into baggage to be discarded so he could run away to a beach house with a man named Kieran. I looked at the timestamp on the last message. It was sent right before he walked into the bathroom this morning, right before he rubbed my back and told me he was worried about me. He kissed my forehead. I whispered to the empty room. He kissed me, and he was already counting the money. I didn't wait for Detective Tate to come back. I pressed the call button until a nurse came, and I demanded to be taken to the station. They tried to stop me. They said I was unstable. I told them I was the only witness they had, and if they didn't take me, I would walk. An hour later, I was sitting in a dark observation room, looking through a one-way mirror. The burner phone was in an evidence bag on the table in front of me. Bennett was in the interrogation room. He had lost the suit jacket. He was leaning forward, his elbows on the metal table, giving Detective Tate a look of earnest, misunderstood virtue. "You have to understand, Detective," Bennett was saying, his voice smooth as silk. "Julianne has a history of mental instability. Postpartum depression runs in her family. She's been talking about hurting herself. I watched him spin the web. It was masterful. She made that breakfast," Bennett lied effortlessly. She was confused. "She thought she was making it for me, then she got angry and gave it to my mother. I tried to stop her. I tried to warn my mother. But Julianne, she just snapped. I didn't want to tell you this, but I think she might have put something in it to hurt herself, and my mother got caught in the crossfire." Detective Tate sat quietly listening. He nodded along. "You're saying your wife poisoned the eggs, intending to commit suicide?" Tate asked. Bennett nodded sadly. "It's the only explanation. I've been trying to get her help for weeks. I love her, Detective. I just want to get her into a facility where she can be safe." I felt a surge of bile. He was using his toxic positivity on the police. He was painting himself as the saintly husband trying to save his crazy wife. Tate stood up. He picked up a folder from the floor. "That's a very compelling story, Mr. Chambers. It really is, but we found something interesting." Bennett frowned. "What?" Tate pulled the evidence bag out of the folder, the one containing the black flip phone. Bennett's face went slack. The color drained out of him so fast he looked like he might faint. "We found this in the biohazard bin," Tate said. "Your wife fished it out. She's very determined for a woman who wants to kill herself." Bennett didn't speak. He stared at the phone like it was a live cobra. "We unlocked it, Mr. Chambers," Tate continued. "Julianne knew the code. July 4th. Freedom Day." Tate opened the folder and slid a printout across the table. It was a transcript of the texts. "Care to explain who Kay is?" Tate asked, "and why you promised him no baggage by September." Bennett slumped back in his chair. The helpful husband was gone. The arrogant lawyer was gone. All that was left was a small, terrified man who realized the walls had just closed in. Bennett cracked. It didn't take long. Once he realized the texts were admissible, he turned on Kieran so fast it would have given a weaker man whiplash. He gave them the name. Kieran Vane. A pharmaceutical rep he had met at a gym 6 months ago. They brought Kieran in 2 hours later. I watched from the hallway as they marched him in. He was exactly as Mrs. Higgins had described. Tall, blonde, devastatingly handsome in a sharp black suit. He looked like a model, not a murderer. He walked with an air of annoyance, like this was a scheduling conflict rather than a felony arrest. He spotted Bennett through the open door of the interrogation room. Bennett was weeping, his head in his hands. Kieran stopped. He looked at Bennett, then he looked at me, standing by the water cooler. He didn't know who I was. To him, I was just a woman in the hallway. He offered me a tight, polite smile, a reflex of charm, before the officer shoved him forward. "Move it, Vane." I watched him go. This was the man my husband wanted to replace me with. This was the man who had texted patients when Bennett complained I wasn't dying fast enough. Detective Tate walked over to me. He looked tired but satisfied. "Kieran had a bag in his car," Tate said quietly. "Cash, passports, and 2 one-way tickets to Brazil. They were leaving tonight, Julianne." "Tonight?" I leaned against the wall. "Bennett wasn't going to wait for the funeral," Tate said. "He was going to claim grief, leave you to deal with the aftermath of your mother-in-law's death, and disappear. He emptied the accounts to fund the run." "So I have nothing," I said. The realization hit me harder than the poison. He's in jail, but the money is gone. The house is probably leveraged. I have a baby coming in 6 months, and I am completely destitute. Tate sighed. The courts can try to recover the assets, but if he moved it offshore, it could take years. I looked at the interrogation room where Bennett was sobbing. He was alive. He would get 3 meals a day. He would have a lawyer. I touched my stomach. I was alive, but I was alone. I had no money, no home I could afford, and a child on the way. The threat hadn't ended with the arrest. The threat was just beginning. It was the threat of survival. I walked toward the exit of the police station. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the parking lot. I had won the battle, but as I stepped out into the cool evening air, I realized the war for my life was far from over. The ICU was a cathedral of beeping machines and hushed voices. I stood at the foot of the bed, watching the slow, rhythmic rise of Priscilla's chest. She looked smaller without her armor, the hairspray, the tailored suits, the sneer. She looked like a fragile bird that had flown into a window. Dr. Monroe stood beside me. "We're lowering the sedation," she said softly. "She's starting to respond to commands. She might be confused. She might be agitated." I nodded. I felt a strange numbness. My husband was in a cell. His lover was in the cell next to him. And the woman who had made my life hell was the only family I had left. Priscilla's eyelids fluttered. A groan escaped her lips, dry and cracking. Her hand twitched against the white sheet. "Priscilla," I said, "can you hear me?" Her eyes opened. They were glassy, unfocused. She stared at the ceiling for a long moment, then her gaze drifted down and locked onto me. Confusion clouded her face, followed by a sharp spark of recognition. "Julianne," she rasped. Her voice sounded like grinding stones. I stepped closer. "I'm here." Where is he? She didn't ask, "Where am I?" or "What happened?" She asked where he was. She remembered. "He's not coming, Priscilla." She tried to sit up, but the tubes and wires held her down. A panic monitor spiked, the beeping quickening like a racing heart. Did he do it?" she whispered. "The snake." I took a breath. The truth was going to break her, but she deserved the truth. "Yes," I said. "He put antifreeze in the breakfast. He meant it for me." "You took the bullet, Priscilla." She closed her eyes. A single tear, hot and slow, tracked through the lines of her face. She didn't scream. She didn't wail. She just lay there, absorbing the fact that the son she had worshipped, the son she had defended against me every single day, had served her death on a wooden tray. The silence stretched for minutes, heavy and suffocating. I thought she had fallen back asleep, but then her hand moved. It reached out, trembling, fingers searching the air. I hesitated, then took her hand. Her grip was weak, nothing like the iron claw that had grabbed me in the kitchen. "I raised a monster," she whispered. Her eyes were still closed. "You didn't know," I said. It was a reflexive comfort, a lie we tell mothers. "I knew," she snapped, her eyes flying open with a flash of her old fire. "I knew he was selfish. I knew he was cold. I taught him to be that way. I told him feelings were for weak people. I told him success was the only thing that mattered." She squeezed my hand, her nails digging in slightly. "I thought you were the weak one, Julianne. I thought you were dragging him down. But you dragged me out of that kitchen. You called the ambulance. You stayed. I had nowhere else to go," I admitted. "He took the money, Priscilla. He emptied the accounts. I'm broke." Priscilla let out a dry, hacking laugh that turned into a cough. "Broke?" she wheezed. "My dear, you're not broke. You're a Chambers. And so is that baby." She looked at my stomach. "He tried to kill my grandchild," she said, the words dripping with ice. "He tried to kill my legacy." The softness vanished from her face, replaced by a terrifying resolve. "Call my lawyer," she commanded, her voice gaining strength. "Not Bennett's lawyer. My lawyer. The shark. We are going to freeze his assets before he can spend a dime on his defense. We are going to bury him, Julianne. And you and I? We are going to take everything back." I looked at this woman, this dragon who had tormented me for months. She wasn't my friend. She wasn't warm. But as she lay there plotting the destruction of her own son to save me, I realized she was exactly the ally I needed. The house felt like a mausoleum. The police had finished their initial sweep, leaving behind black dust from fingerprinting and the lingering scent of strangers. I walked into the kitchen. The yellow police tape was still draped across the island, marking the spot where Bennett had sliced the ginger. I wasn't here to reminisce. I was here to hunt. Priscilla's lawyer had been ruthless, but Bennett's defense team was already spinning a narrative. They were claiming the burner phone was planted. They were claiming the antifreeze was just a household cleaner I had misused. They needed physical proof that he had bought it, stored it, and prepared it. I went to the garage. It was Bennett's domain. Perfectly organized tools he never used, a pristine workbench. I scanned the shelves, paint cans, oil, weed killer, all standard, all innocent. But Bennett was a creature of habit. He hid things in plain sight. I looked at the row of expensive matching toolboxes. The red one was for wrenches, the blue one for electrical, the black one. The black one was locked. I picked up a hammer from the bench. I didn't bother looking for a key. I smashed the lock. 1 strike, 2. The metal gave way with a satisfying crunch. I threw the lid open. Inside, nestled in foam padding like a sniper rifle, was a chemistry set. Not a child's toy, but professional-grade glassware, beakers, droppers, and 3 jugs of industrial solvent. There was a notebook, too. I opened it. It wasn't a diary, it was a log. Dates, dosages, symptoms. October 5th, 2 drops. Subject complained of headache. October 12th, 4 drops. Subject vomited dinner. November 1st, subject is losing weight. Perfect. I stared at the handwriting. It was Bennett's jagged architectural scrawl. He hadn't just poisoned me, he had experimented on me. He had treated his wife like a lab rat. I took a picture with my phone, my hands shaking so hard the image blurred. I took another. Then I called Detective Tate. I found it, I said. I found the lab. The months leading up to the trial were a blur of depositions and legal maneuvering. Bennett didn't take a plea. His arrogance wouldn't let him. He truly believed he could charm a jury, just like he had charmed me, just like he charmed his clients. He sat at the defense table in a fresh suit, looking well-rested. He had shaved his head, trying to look sympathetic, like a monk rather than a murderer. When I walked into the courtroom to testify, he didn't glare. He looked at me with sad, puppy dog eyes. Toxic positivity, I thought. Even now. His lawyer, a woman with a voice like a razor blade, tried to tear me apart. "Mrs. Chambers, isn't it true you were suffering from prenatal depression?" she asked. "I was sick," I said clearly, "because I was being poisoned." "But you didn't know that, did you? You just felt terrible. You felt hopeless. Isn't it possible you wanted a way out?" I looked at the jury. 12 strangers, a teacher, a mechanic, a grandmother. "I wanted to be a mother," I said to them. "I bought a crib. I painted the nursery yellow. People who want to die don't sand down vintage furniture for a baby they plan to kill." The lawyer pivoted. "And your mother-in-law? You gave her the poisoned food. Was that an act of love?" "It was an act of exhaustion," I said, "and it saved my life." I looked at Bennett. He was shaking his head slightly, mouthing the word no, looking devastated. He was performing. But then Priscilla took the stand. They wheeled her in. She was still weak, using a cane, but her mind was sharp. She didn't look at Bennett once. "Mrs. Chambers," the defense attorney asked, "surely you don't believe your son tried to murder you?" Priscilla adjusted her glasses. "My son tried to murder an inconvenience," she said, her voice projecting to the back of the room. "I was just collateral damage. He didn't care enough to check who was eating. He just wanted the body count to start." Bennett flinched. That was the first crack. The validation from his mother, the rejection from his mother, hit him harder than any evidence I could provide. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. It was fast. Too fast, the pundit said. Fast verdicts usually meant guilty, but sometimes they meant the case was too weak to argue. I sat in the front row. Priscilla sat next to me, her hand resting on the head of her cane. We didn't speak. We just waited. The bailiff announced the jury had reached a verdict. The door opened. Bennett stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He looked confident. He looked ready to walk out the door and fly to Rio. We, the jury, find the defendant, Bennett Thomas Chambers, on the count of attempted murder in the first degree. Guilty. Bennett's knees buckled. His lawyer had to grab his elbow to keep him upright. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder. Guilty. On the count of aggravated assault. Guilty. The word kept coming. Guilty. 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 Like a drumbeat. Bennett spun around. He looked at the gallery. He looked for Kieran, but Kieran had already taken a plea deal and testified against him. He looked for his friends, but the pews were empty. Finally, he looked at me. "Julianne," he screamed. The veneer finally stripping away completely. "This is your fault. You ruined everything. You were supposed to die." The bailiffs were on him instantly. They wrestled him down, his face pressed against the table where he had planned his defense. I looked at him, really looked at him, one last time. "I didn't die, Bennett," I whispered, though he couldn't hear me over his own screaming. "I won." Priscilla stood up slowly. She looked at her son, thrashing on the floor like a toddler. "Pathetic," she muttered. She turned to me. "Come on, dear. We have a nursery to finish." The nursery was yellow, just as I had planned. The sun streamed through the white curtains, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I sat in the rocking chair, the wood creaking softly beneath me. In my arms, Hope was sleeping. She was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a tuft of dark hair that curled at the ends. She let out a soft sigh, her tiny chest rising and falling against mine. She had no idea that her father was sitting in a maximum security prison, serving 2 consecutive life sentences. She had no idea she had survived a chemical assault before she took her first breath. Footsteps approached the door, not the frantic scuffling of a guilty man, but the slow, rhythmic tap of a cane. Priscilla appeared in the doorway. She was wearing a soft beige cardigan instead of her power suits. She looked softer, too. The lines around her mouth were less severe. "Is she down?" Priscilla whispered. "Just went under," I said. Priscilla walked over and peered into the bundle of blankets. She reached out a finger, her knuckle swollen with arthritis, and stroked Hope's cheek. The baby stirred, grabbing the finger with a surprising strength. "She's a fighter," Priscilla said, a hint of pride in her voice, "just like her mother." I smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached my eyes. "The lawyers say the asset recovery is almost done," Priscilla said, keeping her voice low. "The money from the Cayman account should be back in the trust by Friday. You won't have to worry about the mortgage, Julianne, or college, or anything." I looked up at her. "Thank you, Priscilla, for everything." She waved a hand dismissively, but her eyes were wet. "I'm just cleaning up my mess," she said gruffly. "I broke the first one. I'm going to make sure this one—" She gestured to the baby. "I'm going to make sure she has a chance." She turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "Dinner is at 6, she said. "I'm making lasagna. And Julianne?" "Yes?" I checked the ingredients. "No turmeric." We both laughed. It was a dark, shared joke, the kind only survivors understand. I looked back down at my daughter. My husband had tried to erase us. He had tried to turn us into a tragic backstory for his new life. But he had failed. He was a memory, fading fast behind bars and glass walls. We were the reality. We were the future. I kissed Hope's forehead, the spot where the skin was softest. "We made it," I whispered to her. "We made it the hard way." If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.